'Cause baby, I'm an anarchist.
You are listening to the Circle Day Show on Resonance 104.4 FM with me, Yadette Gerez. On this episode, we have a special guest, Suzanne Wands. Suzanne Wands is a former actor, now writer, and tarot enthusiast. In London, she has lectured at Watkin Books for their Recorded Authors series and at Atlantis Books, also travelling to present at a Culture Berlin Festival. Suzanne's first books, part of the Arcana Oracle series, Magician and the Fool, Book 1, are based on Pamela Coleman Smith, who was the mysterious creator of the best-selling tarot, the Waite-Smith deck. Pamela Coleman Smith, born in 1878 and died in 1951, born in London, raised in Jamaica, perhaps has Jamaican descent, but there's no proof of that other than how she appears in her photos, studied in New York and settled back in the UK. She was a gifted individual. Her circle of contemporaries are very well established in Western culture, but not so much Pamela yet. And she was involved with the suffragette movement poster making. That's just a fraction of what I found out about her thanks to Susan's research. Welcome on the show, Susan.
Thank you. I'm so pleased to be here with you. I'm showing you just a quick picture of how I got started in what we consider classical theater. I was at a Shakespeare festival in Ashland, Oregon for a while. Then I did some classics in regional theater in Oscar Wilde's An Ideal Husband. And here I am in Henry IV in a Marivaux play. Also, these are some pictures that I have of Pamela Coleman Smith, and I'll send you later, in all her many different incarnations. You can sort of see when she was first starting out as a storyteller for the Jamaican Anansi stories, she would dress up in sort of this mashup of a Victorian garb and Jamaican coral and fringe. And she would do these little cutouts as puppets right before her as part of the Anansi stories. And this was part of the allure to try to find out this wonderful blend of Jamaican, Caribbean, English theater mix that I began to be so entranced by. And you can see it sort of fed into her tarot cards, that she was a true blend of not only the Pratt Institute of Art that she attended in Brooklyn, but also theater posters and all sorts of storytelling. What I'm up to now is the fourth book of my series. I went to Dublin and have been doing some research about the ley lines in England and in Ireland, about the magical channels that happened there. William Butler Yeats, who was a close friend of Pamela's, figures very heavily in the fourth book. So I've been doing a lot of investigating the Golden Dawn and his magical practice, and what he has to do in terms of bringing Pamela along this line of her readings and things. But I'm starting now with the early part of Pamela's life. And you can see that the Anansi stories were the very first books to be published in the United States that dealt with Jamaican patois. And they had never really understood what that dialect was or the beauty of those folktales. And she wrote and illustrated these stories that were told to her by Miss Jones, who was the nanny, the person who was part of the family. But then she went on to illustrate all these children's books like The Golden Vanity that had pirates. And at 15, she relocated with her family from Jamaica to Brooklyn, where she attended the Pratt Institute of Art. And her mother's cousin was a famous actor named William Gillette. And he was playing the role of Sherlock Holmes on Broadway in New York City. And he needed someone to illustrate his souvenir program. And he'd heard that one of his cousins had a daughter and she was an illustrator. And so she did this brochure, which led to her doing the brochure for the Lyceum Theater with Ellen Terry and Henry Irving. Now, this was in addition to all the other things that she was doing. She was a child prodigy. By the time she was 19, she was a published author. She was doing performances of toy theater where she had 350 puppets and a live orchestra. She was doing posters and cards. And this is another poster that I'm showing you of Ellen Terry from this brochure where she was playing Queen Catherine in the Henry VIII. And from this job, from doing these posters for the souvenir program, after both her parents died in 1899, she sailed back to London, where she was born, with the Lyceum Theatre. And from there, she began to do even more brilliant artwork. One of my favorite pictures of her, you can see here on the very far side, is once again Ellen Terry, who became sort of her surrogate mother in Mistress Page in The Merry Wives of Windsor. But this middle picture, Yodette, is very dear to me. This is a picture of Ellen Terry and her daughter, Edie Craig. Now, Edie sort of became her half sister or adopted sister. And this is a style of artwork that Pamela didn't do very well. It's more fine drawing. It's very sculptured. It's very set. But where Pamela really came into her own is in the vivid colors of this painting that you can see on the other side called Sea Creatures. In her lifetime, Pamela did 22 transatlantic journeys. And if you figure that each transatlantic ship was at least 2 weeks, that's almost 2 years at sea. And during that time, she became to have a very deep communication and affiliation, not only with ships, but with the sea and sea creatures and seeing things. And I think this particular painting really draws that up. Now, she also was one of the first artists to show in New York City at Alfred Stieglitz Gallery, and this was at 291 Fifth Avenue. At this time, she started a different kind of artwork because she had a capability that we now understand that's called synesthesia. And synesthesia is when our brains cross hatch, like you taste colors or you feel hearing or you have these mashup, almost hallucinogenic touchings of what senses are. And when she would listen to music on the gramophone, she would have like this little portal appear before her, like a camera lens, and widen out to a scene. And from that, she would very quickly sketch it and then come back to it and then fill it in. In the very middle picture, I don't know if you can see at the very bottom, it says Mozart. And then it has 1907. It has some astrological signs in there. And then we have her signature. Now, her signature is really important because she learned that this is a sigil of sorts. And a sigil is a magical application of putting together symbols to create a spell. And there's several ways you can learn how to make a sigil. Pamela used this in almost everything she had as a form as copyright. And the thing I love about her signature is she also put in the very British, what you guys would call a full stop or a period. And this was known as a copyright statement saying, end of painting, end of artwork. This belongs to me. I own this. And I love the fact that this is in her artwork. It's in her tarot cards. It is not in the posters that she did for the suffragettes, because that was more of a communal, I anonymously give my artwork to this cause. But for the things that she really believed in that were hers and needed to have her ownership to it, you can find her name on this. So, and from this kind of artwork, she went on to publishing with the Yeats brothers, John Butler and William Butler Yeats. In the 1902s, out of Ireland, they published something called a broadsheet. And you can see on this broadsheet, this newspaper, there's a painting, an illustration of Yeats very dreamily in his little wool jacket, and his glasses are to his side and the fairies are appearing before him. And these are self-published subscription newsletters that she would provide illustrations and poems. Now, it got to the point where she felt like she was just a wheel in the cog and they weren't really appreciating her contributions. So she started her own newsletter, and that was called The Green Sheaf. And she did about 9 of these from 1903, 1904, 5. And you can see in one of these that she is the one who's in charge of this. She is publishing, printing, selling, illustrating, recruiting talent for it. It was a one-person show for this. And in addition to that, she's also doing posters, not only for the war effort, you can see the bulldog poster that she's doing, but also for the Polish Victims Relief Fund. We have this very beautiful sort of painting with the Holy Virgin of Czechoslovakia coming through in that. But you notice there really isn't a sigil or a signature in that. And then in addition, while she's doing that, she's also doing this amazing upholstery embroidery work that she was doing with the women of the Golden Dawn. I mean, it was sort of a way that they could also make money. But look at all the hours it would take for her to create this stool covering. And it's so vibrant. And there's such a mashup. You can see astrological signs, Catholic symbology. There's the Cancer, the crab. I mean, she just I mean, the thing that's so great about her that is sort of controversial still to this day is that she was the ultimate mashup. She would put symbols from the Jewish faith, from Islam, from Catholic, from Greek, from Roman. I mean, she was a universal interpreter of these symbols. And I think that's one of the reasons why her artwork has survived for so many decades. And this leads into the beginning of starting these tarot cards, which was she was solicited by this A.E. Waite. He left the Golden Dawn to start his own faction. And here's a little sketchbook from one of her cards where it looks like she's designing the cards with Waite sitting next to her. But I love the gargoyle sort of pointing the finger at her. You do it this way. And there's like a little bat. It could be Bram Stoker's undead Dracula. And here's a letter that she wrote to Stieglitz that has the famous quote that says, I've just finished a big job for very little cash, a set of designs for a deck of tarot cards, 80 designs. I shall send some over. And so you can tell that this tarot deck that made millions and millions of dollars eventually, she got paid very little money for it. And I've put a little section of just 6 of the cards. Some from the major arcana, which are the first 22 cards, and the rest from the minors. That's just a brief overview of her artistic life, how she got into the world of theater and the Golden Dawn in London in the early 1900s, and what her background was.